On October 1st, 2025, we lost one of the greatest minds in the history of science, Dr. Jane Goodall. The study of anthropology, conservation, and the history of science would not be where it is today if it were not for her contributions. In fact, I would go so far as to say that Jane Goodall was a modern Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin taught us the theory of evolution by means of natural selection, in that organisms must compete and slowly develop adaptations in order to secure resources and survive. What Darwin theorized is that humans as a species are not above this. Building off Darwin's idea, paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey sent Goodall to Tanzania in the 1960s to observe chimpanzees in their natural habitats in order to better understand human behavior in the past. What Goodall found truly changed science. She documented that chimpanzees also use tools, and that humans are not the only tool-using species, and that humans are not that special. We just have the ability to think so. What I also admire about Goodall was that she did this in the 1960s at a time when Tanzania was still a protectorate of the British government. She wasn't able to go alone, so she brought her mother. And while her mother stayed at camp, Jane Goodall, in Chuck Taylor's, climbed mountains, climbed hillsides, and trekked through dense jungle, and observed and watched chimpanzees for months until she slowly gained their trust and was able to interact with them. She didn't give chimpanzees numbers. She gave them names. And she also discovered that chimpanzees are emotionally, socially, and mentally more complex than we ever imagined. What Goodall also did, in addition to her lifetime of preaching conservation and preaching science, was that she also paved the way for women in the field. In her words, women didn't do that at the time, in 1960. It was unheard of. And it is thanks to Dr. Goodall that many women today believe she paved the way for them to have their place in science. But she didn't just pave the way for women. She also paved the way for people like Carl Sagan, Steve Irwin, and Neil deGrasse Tyson, as Goodall had such a sweet and calm demeanor, effective communication skills, and her ability to grip and engage millions of people around the world anytime she spoke. She also paved the way for people like myself, anthropologists who study our relationship to other species and how that relationship can be deeply anthropological. Another thing I loved about Goodall was she was just so sweet and funny. All of her speeches had great comedic timing, great joke structure, and she always knew when to leave room for laughter. I believe this is part of the reason why she was such an effective communicator. And along those lines, Goodall has been on record saying that she believes she was put on this earth as some kind of messenger, to spread the message of science and conservation to anybody willing to listen. And finally, something that I believe Goodall should be remembered for the rest of history is that even at the age of 91, Goodall spent over 300 days a year on the road teaching science, compassion for animals, and conservation to anybody who would listen, and she did so until the day she died. Dr. Goodall was truly an amazing person. With all that said, I'd like to go back to my original statement. I believe Jane Goodall was a modern Charles Darwin, and if not Charles Darwin, what Jane Goodall was Dr. Jane Goodall.
But mainly, though, what she did was revolutionize how we think about our relation to other animals, especially for people like me, who talk about this all day for work, shifted our understanding of that, and she paved the way for a lot of women in science to get them into the field. She also paved the way for people like Carl Sagan, for Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Steve Irwin. And then what she also did was every day, 300 days a year, went on tour speaking about our relationship to animals, conservation, and science. And she did that until the day she died. So I just want everyone to know she was an amazing person, I would say a saint, and she did so much for the history of science, and she will be missed. So if everyone could raise their glass, shout out to Jane Goodall. Thank you.
For this video, I've reached out to several content creators and researchers I know and gave them a platform to speak about what Jane Goodall meant to them and how she paved the way for what they do today. But before we get to that, I'd like to share one more thing about Dr. Goodall. When I was in college at the University of Tennessee, I took a primatology course with Dr. Joanne Devlin. And for the final project of that class, we got to study chimpanzees at the Knoxville Zoo. One of the things I recorded was that George was using a blanket to spin a ball in a depression of the enclosure, and he would sit there, a 3-year-old chimpanzee, and watch the ball spin until it stopped, and then take the blanket and do the same again. It was fascinating for me to watch, so I'm sure it was endlessly entertaining for him. But what I'll never forget about that day was a woman was there with her children. She was holding a stroller. I remember this vividly. And she noticed I was taking notes, but then subtly asked after she saw me like giggle at the chimpanzee. And she said, "Why is he doing that?" And I just gave her the answer of, he's just a baby. He's playing with his toys just like a human one. And I remember her kind of going like, "Oh, okay." And it wasn't the most eventful story, but I got to share that moment with a stranger because we both were just fascinated by how this chimpanzee was just playing. It's a story that wouldn't have happened without Dr. Goodall's work. And it's one of my favorite memories of college because I got to study chimpanzees for a class. And as well, later on in that project, this was in 2014, and what we were technically doing was comparing his behavior from the class before, who observed it in 2013, and comparing it to the 2014 behavior. And something that was just so funny to me was that George had two parents, a mother and a father, that also lived with them in the enclosure, and they kind of had enough of his jackassery, I would say. He just was too much to deal with sometimes. So his Uncle Lou, who was a little more patient, would spend more time with him because he was more patient with George, and George would also test his limits. And I have a video here where George was taking a stick, trying to get and antagonize Lou and entice him to play. So when I was recording ethograms, I would write playing, antagonizing. And eventually, as you can see in this clip here, Lou has enough of it and then starts to take after George. But it's just little things like that wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for Goodall's work. Because again, it's not observing a gopher, it's not observing a dog or observing some kind of a school of fish in the ocean. You're observing something that's human. I truly believe behind chimpanzee eyes is humanity. They are a sapient being just like us, and they deserve protection. And I will stand by that until the day I die, as Dr. Goodall did until the day she did, October 1st, 2025. So anyway, I'm going to pass the mic on to other researchers and content creators who would like to share some stuff about Dr. Goodall. And please stay around and listen to what they have to say, because it is truly amazing to me how many people Jane Goodall touched without even having met them. So without further ado, here we go.
My name is Carson Black. I'm a primatologist, and my very field would not exist without Jane Goodall. So thank you, Jane, for inspiring a legion of people and women like me who wanted to go to the field and wanted to do something that was out of their comfort zone, because I did it, I lived it, and I have you to thank for that. Thanks, Jane.
It's really difficult to summarize and synthesize what a profound effect Jane Goodall has had. She revolutionized how we think about the primate mind. She made it her life's work to put her expertise, her name, and her academic weight behind environmental causes like conservation and protection. And most of all, she had an excellent sense of humor. She clearly found joy in learning about the world. And she took the science seriously, but she never took herself too seriously. She's on record saying that chimpanzees are not her favorite animal because they're too much like humans. She much preferred dogs instead. She was featured in a Far Side cartoon, and her response was something like, "At last, real fame." And I think that curiosity, that joy, and that ability to do serious work and have a serious impact on the world without self-aggrandizing and without a huge sense of ego, I think that is one of the things that has stuck with me the most as part of Jane Goodall's legacy.
Ciao, mi chiamo Alice, sono una laureanda in archeologia preistorica all'Università degli Studi di Ferrara. Mi occupo in particolare di archeologia, ovvero lo studio del rapporto tra gli animali e gli esseri umani nei siti archeologici. Chi è stata per me Jane Goodall? Jane Goodall per me è stata quella ragazza che aveva un sogno molto semplice, quello di poter vivere con gli animali. E nonostante fosse una donna molto giovane e senza nessun titolo di studio, lei ce l'ha effettivamente fatta. Mi ha ispirato perché ha mostrato come per capire la natura ci voglia empatia. Ci voglia empatia e che la bellezza sta nelle piccole cose, dal fruscio di una foglia al cinguettio di un uccello al sorriso di uno scimpanzé, e che per capire la natura bisogna prima imparare ad ascoltarla. Grazie mille, Jane.
My name is Andy. I'm a former anthro student, current research professional, and I run the science communication account Ancestral Habits on Instagram. So this is my story with Jane Goodall. I did a report on her when I was like 8 or 9 years old. We had to choose a woman of consequence, and there were awesome options. But of course, as kids, we have such a deep, pure connection to nature and to animals. So she was the obvious choice, the coolest choice. There's just such an instant grab with her story because she fearlessly lived in the jungle studying primates. And you have to be so brave to do that, but also as a woman and in the 1950s, and she was in her 20s. And I think also her parents were like a businessman and an author, so this was like way out of her element. And I could relate to that as a kid growing up in the United States. And this unwavering and unapologetic courage to just do what you know is right really characterized Jane Goodall. And I think that's so inspiring to others because we can all kind of feel that beneath the surface, especially when there are barriers in life. Jane just actualized that courage, and that kind of paved the way for other women to overcome the fears and the what ifs and the bravery to step out of what society expects of you and what it tells you can do. And even more impressive, she did it all with such humility and humble strength, always leading by example and through consistent actions. Up until I read somewhere that when she was in her 80s, she was touring like 300 days per year, which is amazing. I think this is hitting so many people so hard because many of us have grown up with the peace of mind that Jane is out there, just this beacon of hope and reason. And that was so calming. But now I guess we uphold her message and her mission and help fight for her legacy of protecting and conserving the environment and the planet and the animals. And most importantly, leading with kindness and compassion in everything that we do. So thank you, Jane.
I'm Aspen. I am a Canadian researcher and a wildlife guide. And aside from the more obvious influence of Dr. Goodall in showing that young women and girls can absolutely be pioneers in STEM and science and research and wildlife conservation, for me, her influence was most powerful in showing that animals can have personalities, they have stories, they have feelings and families, and those stories are what we need to share with the world to get us to kind of connect with them a lot stronger. So thank you, Dr. Goodall, and we love you.
Hi, my name is Brianna Godberson. I'm creator and host of the Find Your Wild podcast, and I was always very inspired by Jane Goodall. I think that she was a really big part of why I decided to create the Find Your Wild podcast, and has been so inspirational to me personally for many years. And I love her focus on individuality and focusing on the sentient beings that are around us and that animals are sentient beings. I loved that every single life, even down to the littlest fly, is important for our entire ecosystem and our planet. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Jane, for your legacy, and I hope that we can all pick up a piece of it in your honor. So thank you, Jane Goodall.
My name's Cassidee Thornhill. I'm the collections manager for the University of Wyoming Archaeological Repository. Jane Goodall meant so much to so many people. Her contributions to science and to the world are countless. To me personally, she was a huge inspiration. When I was little, my parents bought my sister and I Nat Geo wildlife VHS tapes. There was one about African wildlife that featured Jane Goodall and her research with chimpanzees. I've always been very passionate about wildlife and their behavior, and seeing Jane interacting with wild chimpanzees and speaking about their complex emotions and how they use tools very similar to humans left a huge impact on me. She spoke about how she respected the chimps individually and that they share many of the same emotions as humans, such as joy and sadness. She inspired me to become a scientist. And when I went into the field of anthropology and learned that as a primatologist, she was also an anthropologist, I knew I was in the right field. Thank you, Jane.
Hello, my name is Erina Baci and I am an archaeologist. For me, Jane Goodall embodies the importance of empathy and the moral courage that reminds us as scientists that we must not only seek knowledge, but use it to serve humanity and the living world which we share it with. In a field that has been traditionally dominated by men, Jane has always served as a role model for not only myself, but many young women, to show us that there is a space and a place for us in this discipline and that we can succeed. So thank you, Jane, for reminding us what it truly means to be human, for blazing a trail for young women everywhere, and reminding us to always be kind.
My name is Heather Rockwell. I'm an assistant professor in the Noreen Stoner Drexel Cultural and Historic Preservation Program at Salve Regina University. Jane Goodall was someone who really inspired me to be a field scientist. I'd always wanted to be an archaeologist, but I'd never really pictured myself outside doing hardcore field science. Somehow that had always felt sort of out of reach, and I assumed I'd end up in a museum or a lab space. But at a young age, I remember seeing a video of her out in the jungle doing her field work with chimpanzees and just seemed completely fearless. And it inspired me to be able to do what I do today as an archaeologist. Thank you, Jane.
Hi, I'm Iride Tomazic. I'm a graduate student at the University of Michigan doing a PhD in anthropological archaeology. When I think about Jane Goodall, I think about a giant, not just as in terms of research, but also as a person. She inspired me to pursue my work with empathy, passion, and with understanding that everything is interconnected in our environment. She's one of the people that kept giving hope for our future and for the future generation. Thank you, Jane.
My name is Jen, and I am working on my PhD in anthropology. In particular, I'm studying archaeology. What makes Jane Goodall so amazing to me is the fact that she was younger than I am now when she went out into the jungle and made one of the biggest discoveries in primatology history. Like, she discovered that apes were using tools as just like a young 20-something grad student, and that's just insane. Like, she made this amazing discovery, and because she was just a young girl, some people just didn't believe her. And the fact that, like, obviously she has been proven to be right through time just makes her all the more impressive. And one of the things that makes Jane Goodall so inspiring is that she didn't just make this one discovery. She kept going out there and dedicated her life to this amazing species and making sure that they got the recognition that they deserved. What makes Jane Goodall so inspiring is that she was doing this during a time where women really weren't supposed to be in the sciences like this. Like, she was out here doing incredible work at a time where women weren't encouraged to do so. And as a woman in science, thank you, Jane.
Hi, my name is Kathia. I'm a sociologist, anthropologist, and science communicator. I must say that Jane Goodall has always been an inspiration to me. She changed the way we see knowledge, nature, and even empathy. When she named the chimpanzees that she studied, she broke an old idea that a researcher must stay distant, that we should never get too close to what we study. Yeah, for real. By giving them names, she reminded us that every being has a story, a mind, and even a personality. Observation became a relationship, not a hierarchy. That courage to challenge the rules shaped the way I see my own work. I believe that understanding begins with empathy. Jane taught us that science isn't about control, it's about connection. And that lesson still guides me every day. Gracias, Jane.
There once was a young girl whose curiosity wasn't stifled by a mother who thought she needed to behave like everyone else around her, who was able to feed her curiosity about animals without restrictions, who turned into a young woman with the dream of working in Africa with wildlife and observing wildlife, even though she had no proper education in this field. After she met Louis Leakey, she got the opportunity of a lifetime to study chimpanzees in the wild at the Gombe Stream National Park, and in doing so, Jane changed the way we humans perceive other animals, and she made us all understand that we humans are a part of the animal kingdom. Her work was groundbreaking and led to the realization that humans and chimpanzees are much more alike than many humans would like to admit. She's been an inspiration to many around the globe, including me personally, because I am an amateur and I'm working in a field along experts. She founded the Jane Goodall Institute to promote wildlife conservation as well as the Roots and Shoots youth program, and she also established wildlife sanctuaries and reforestation projects in Africa, campaigned for the ethical treatment of animals in animal testing, animal husbandry, and captivity. She was appointed a United Nations Messenger of Peace because her biggest message of all was for us humans to be kind and good to everyone. Not just the other humans that we kinda like, but everyone. Jane was once a curious young girl who followed her dreams, and she grew into a beautiful woman with a kind heart and a pure soul. And eventually, she reached a legendary status as she is known across the globe for her incredible hard work. And now that she's gone off on her next adventure, there's only one thing left for us to say. Thank you, Jane.
Hi, I'm Kelsey, former archaeologist and current greenhouse manager. Though I'm no longer in the anthropology world, that's not the only area of my life that Jane Goodall has impacted me. She taught us that science doesn't have to be, and in fact shouldn't be, devoid of empathy and humanity. Her lifetime of advocacy for wildlife and environmental conservation is aspirational, and the fact that she started that work during a time when women were almost absent from the scientific community makes her legacy that much more impressive. Jane Goodall inspired a generation of scientists, and she'll continue to inspire future generations. Thank you, Jane.
Dr. Jane Goodall has had such an impact on environmentalists, scientists, and women across the globe. As a child, seeing her work greatly inspired me to pursue the path that I'm on today. However, I believe that Jane's most underrated legacy is how she taught us all to live. She once said that you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you, emphasizing that we should live with intentionality and rejecting the belief that it's possible to be mere bystanders to the things happening in this world. Dr. Jane impacted the way that I and so many others view the world, and for that I say thank you, Jane.
Hola, soy Laura, soy etóloga y educadora canina. Cuando tenía como 8 años, abrí una revista de National Geographic y leí un artículo sobre Jane Goodall que me ayudó a conectar con mi verdadera vocación, la que iba a ser mi vocación 30 años más adelante. Desde chiquita, desde esos 8 años, fui fan, me inspiró muchísimo. De hecho, empecé a estudiar a los gatos callejeros que había en casa de mis papás. Me ponía unos binoculares que tenía mi papá y desde la ventana del comedor los estudiaba. Y tenía un cuadernito donde llevaba todas mis anotaciones y dibujaba los gatitos, los colores y qué hacían y cuando se reproducían y tenían gatitos bebés. También llevaba mi registro. Y desde ese momento, bueno, de toda la vida, pero en ese momento en particular, como que entendí o vi algo que me gustaría hacer el resto de mi vida. La vida me cambió de camino por diferentes motivos, pero al final pude dedicarme a lo que más me gusta desde pequeña, que es trabajar y estar con animales, en específico con perros. Y sí, toda mi vida Jane Goodall fue una gran inspiración para lograr y para hacer el trabajo que estoy haciendo hasta el momento. ¿Qué significa Jane Goodall para mí? Esperanza, la verdad. En un mundo tan raro como en el que estamos ahorita, donde pues estamos perdiendo de vista la importancia de la naturaleza y del mundo en el que vivimos y que somos parte de ese mundo y que si no protegemos la naturaleza y si no entendemos a la naturaleza como tal, nos vamos a destruir. Creo que la voz de Jane Goodall siempre ha sido de mucha esperanza y este mensaje de todavía podemos hacer algo por cambiar el rumbo para bien. Entonces, por todo esto, gracias, Jane. Adiós, both.
Hi, my name is Dr. Matilda Siebrecht, and I am an archaeologist and journalist, and this is Jimby, who is a toy monkey that I received on my 4th birthday. He became my favourite toy and has been my constant companion ever since. He inspired in me a slight obsession with primatology, and he made me want to become a primatologist when I was older, which, as you can imagine, being a young girl and wanting to get into primatology, Jane Goodall was an absolute inspiration for me. And even though at university my wishes diverged slightly and I went more down the sort of human evolution, biological anthropology, archaeology route, even then the work that Jane Goodall did still has a lasting impact. Her observations on chimpanzee tool use are extremely relevant to my work of human prehistoric tool use as well that I conduct in my everyday life and research. Also, the fact that she kind of imbued this emotional passion into her work. She didn't just number her subjects, she gave them names. She was able to provide the humanity in scientific research, and I think that that's truly inspirational, especially for other women wanting to get into STEM and get into science. I went and saw a talk by her when I was a teenager, and it wasn't even about primates. It was about wanting to give women a sustainable income by encouraging them to have independent coffee farms in the Congo. Which just goes to show that she wasn't just a scientist. She wasn't just a woman obsessed with chimpanzees. She wanted to help everyone. She wanted to make the world a better place, and she wanted to inspire us to try and make the world a better place as well. So for all of your inspiration, for all of the things that you did, thank you very much, Jane, and rest in peace. Thank you, Jane.
My name is Rebekah Lamb, and I'm an anthropologist. Dr. Goodall inspired me to connect deeply with all of the people on this planet, human and non-human. It's that connection that drives the work that I do today, and none of it would have been possible without Dr. Goodall paving the way. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, Jane.
My name is Sarah Alaun. I am the Assistant State Archaeologist of Colorado. Jane Goodall has had a profound impact, not just on science, but on my own life and career trajectory. My interest in anthropology and in field sciences was ignited in high school. After I read her book, In the Shadow of Man, which was followed very quickly by Diane Fossey's Gorillas in the Mist. For women in anthropology and for women in any field science, Dr. Goodall is a giant. Her pursuits opened up entirely new possibilities for us all. I had the opportunity to see her speak more than a decade ago now, but her message of hope and of action stayed with me. As an archaeologist, I spend my days studying humanity's past, but I am directly inspired by her work to ensure that I do so by thinking of the future. Dr. Goodall has forged a path for generations of women in science, in conservation, and in action. Thank you, Jane.
My name is Dr. Sean Jackwitz. I am a biologist, geneticist, a physician, and a science communicator. And I owe a lot to Dr. Jane Goodall. When I was a kid, I remember being introduced to her articles about spending time and studying the chimpanzee. And I just remember as a kid how admirable and magical that was to commit your life and, be out there with your study, with the animals. I always actually wanted to be a zoologist when I was a child. And it was thanks to her and Steve Irwin that it inspired me to do that. Now I chose a different route of biology for a number of reasons, but I owe a lot of my love to biology to Jane. And so I wanted to say thank you, Dr. Jane Goodall, for everything you did.
Hi, my name is Shelby, and I am an archaeologist and science communicator. Jane Goodall was one of the first names that I ever associated with the field of science. I learned about her in the 2nd grade, and she was basically just the coolest person I'd ever heard about. And learning about her so young taught me that women could not only be scientists, but could also make some of the greatest contributions to the field. So she quickly became a role model of mine, And a seed was planted very early in my life, and I knew that I too could be a scientist. Maybe not as famous, making contributions as large sweeping as hers, of course, but that basically anything was possible for me. Beyond just her contributions to the field, Jane is a role model not just to the young girls who are in science today, but also truly to everybody. Jane really reminds all of us that there is just so much good in the world, and there's so much good that we can also bring into the world. And so, with all of that said, rest in peace, Jane, and thank you for all that you did for science and also for humanity.
Hey, I'm Tom O'Carroll. I'm a content creator exploring my passions for learning new things with a sprinkle of science. And I can't help but just know in myself that Jane is one of those pivotal figures that set me down this path. To me, she's one of the most important people that turned looking at chimps and other animals as these beasts that are disconnected from humanity to these things that we can see ourselves in and draw connections to. Those connections are something that led to my massive interest in learning about evolution, but I also think being able to see ourselves in the world around us is this vital thing if we're going to act as shepherds and conservationists for planet Earth. And the fact that Jane was working to share knowledge and promote the protection of apes and just the environment as a whole right up until her passing is just this incredible reminder that we probably all have it in us to give things a go and pursue our passions really at any age. So for all of that, thank you, Jane.
My name is Vincent Battista, and I'm a statistical geneticist and biological anthropologist by training. Jane means so much to me and people trained like me. She was the first biologist I ever heard of as a kid, and the things that she did in the field left a lasting impression not only on the study of humans, but our closest relatives. And I think probably the most important thing is that Jane's work taught us that we can learn a lot about ourselves by looking outwards. And that is an incredibly important lesson, not only for people studying human evolution, human behavioral ecology, and things like that, but for just people who want to live in a more compassionate and understanding world. And one of the best things about Jane was that she wasn't quiet about the things that she knew was right and wrong in the world. So thank you, Jane.
She definitely paved the way. I mean, I'm not a woman in science for sure, but like just for people like me and you to an extent too, to like be able to nerd out and talk about this stuff. But in that regard, for you, Carson, I would say like as much of an advocate as you are for, you know, social stuff and political stuff and, you know, just what you are passionate about, like, I think she'd be very proud of you and like just the way, you know, you carry yourself. And I respect the shit out of it. And I'm proud of you too.
Thanks, David. I love you so much.
I love you too, Carson. I'm going to cry, but
I'm going to cry.
Yeah, she just like, you're the closest thing I know to her. And like watching her last Netflix thing and watching some of those documentaries, I was just like, man, like that's like, she was just so fucking cool.
She was fucking cool.
Yeah, especially wearing the chucks. And that really threw me off in Africa.
Like, I just can't even. And she's like in cute little shorts too. I would not have been caught dead in shorts unless we were like in town or had a day off from the field because
the bugs,
the terrain, like you're already so filthy and sweaty and gross all the time. Like I didn't want to be muddy. I didn't want to be, it's just funny to look at some of those photos and be like, yeah, she was a badass.
Because not only was Dr. Goodall truly inspiring to me, but clearly to many others as well. And with that said,
there's only one thing left for us to say. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane Goodall.
Grazie mille, Jane.
Thank you, 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 Jane.
Thanks, Jane.
Gracias, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Gracias, Jane. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodall, and we love you.